everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Thursday. Jump the gun. Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Thursday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky joined today and on Friday by the great Jovan Buha from The Athletic. We're going to talk about Russell Westbrook. We're going to talk about LeBron and the coach. It's all good stuff from a great reporter, and that starts next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. We get this thing up as bright and early as we can for you, no matter how you get your podcasts, where you get your podcasts. It's always going to be free for you. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube, where you get to look at us and Jovan while you listen. And that is always a treat. So much to cover with Jovan, who looks like most of the guys who covered the team this year, happier and healthier every day he gets away from the end of the season, refreshed. It wasn't much.
This was
fun,
Jovan during exit interviews. He has since
actually literally I did look. we because they had exit interviews. We had the game in Denver, and then we all took flights at 5:55 a.m. on Southwest Airlines to get back. For LeBron spoke first, then Rob Pelinka, and then they got into the rest of the team.
Well, the 20 minutes that Rob Pelinka gave us was so generous of him.
So it sounds, by the way, like everybody covering the team planned out the exit interviews better than Pelinka, who didn't seem to figure out we need to officially fire Frank Vogel before LeBron talks, as opposed to after, and making him answer questions about it when he can't officially say what he already knows.
That's what I thought, because I thought we had found out that LeBron was going to talk at 9, and I was like, okay, so they're making him go early because they're going to fire Frank after he speaks, so he doesn't have to address it. And then, of course, things went down the way that they went down.
You know, like any organization giving this 30 seconds would have come up with. Like, I mean, once that we don't have to go too far afoul down this, but like once the Woj tweet came out,
the proverbial cat was out of the bag.
Yeah,
as
like
they say.
Why Rob Pelinka wasn't at the airport to meet Vogel face to face at that point when they got in from Denver, to just do it then, I don't understand.
Yeah, and you would also think that there probably would have been some prior conversations between them about sort of what direction they were. I doubt that.
I've been on the hot
about
seat
Frank's
this
future
whole time.
Wait, what?
When
was
did
that
that happen?
exit interviews?
Frank, we don't want to get too specific about what we're going to do after the season's over. We just want to let you know where you put your key card, how to give up your parking pass, and things like that, should we decide to make a change.
Yeah,
it's details. They're not detail oriented. A lot of stuff that we want to get into regarding Russell Westbrook, regarding the coaching search for the aforementioned now gone Frank Vogel. We're going to do that over the course of 2 episodes today and for Friday. Jovan's just, his stuff's too good to use up in one show. But the place actually we want to start is this idea of the core of LeBron and AD, because everything the Lakers are going to do, from the coach, from the roster construction, even to some degree what you do with Russell Westbrook, is kind of predicated on how you feel about LeBron and AD going forward. It was not a good year this year from a health standpoint. AD didn't perform, I would say, when he played as well as people would like. Broadly speaking, Jovan, where do you sit right now on your confidence in this pairing as the foundation for the Lakers going forward for the next few years?
I remain confident in their ability to contend when healthy, but I think that's a growing caveat. And I think one interesting thing that I wrote about at the end of the season was that this was the first year of the LeBron AD era where they did not have a positive net rating with those two on the floor. And I think part of that was the surrounding, Russell Westbrook and the supporting cast. And, so I think it's not that simple of just, they lost their magic together or something like that. But I do think that the health is a concern, and I think it's tough to divorce it from the context of the last two seasons of you had the bubble situation, and then immediately 6 weeks later starting the next season. And I think there is a carryover effect into even the next season where, I think a guy like AD who could, clearly has some fragility issues and sort of needs some, kind of extra time off. Like I think he was kind of playing catch up. So I wonder if like next season is really the first, or like, kind of the next time we could officially judge, like, is this something with AD that he's injury prone and the Lakers really have to potentially consider moving him for whatever they can get for him and kind of going in a different direction. But I think one healthy, we still saw, I mean, because people, like, the end of the season was so bad, but the beginning of the season, while it wasn't great, there still were some encouraging signs. There were some encouraging wins. And I think, again, there's a lot of injuries and the fit with Westbrook just was never there. But I do think that looking at the way they started this season when healthy, and then even going back to the previous season, 21-7 or 21-6 with AD before he goes down, that to me is like there's still something there with the LeBron AD thing. You just got to put the right pieces around them. And I don't think we've seen that, honestly, in any of the 3 seasons. But I think you can make the case it's been getting worse since the first season. So
I would.
That's kind of, where I guess I'm confident in LeBron and AD like as a duo, but can you put the right pieces around them? That I don't know.
When you mentioned before, though, that caveat about the health with LeBron and AD, which I'm not going to lie, I'm really concerned about. I've been growing increasingly less confident about the viability of both of these guys as your foundation moving forward. I think one of the two having availability issues, you can work around that, depending on how extreme it is. Both of them is when it really becomes a problem. It's reminiscent of what the Clippers have dealt with. It's reminiscent of what the Nets have dealt with, not all for exactly the same reasons, but same basic principle. The other concern I have, though, when you had mentioned the carryover effect from the bubble, which is why both Brian and I understood why they didn't run back that team. Like, I don't think it was feasible to do that. But I know that there had been a lot of people thinking, okay, this offseason is going to be really long for the Lakers. It gives LeBron and AD a lot of recovery time heading into next year, except that's what we had actually said heading into this season when the Lakers got eliminated in the first round against Phoenix. They actually had not just a normal length of offseason, it was actually a little bit longer than that. And those health issues surfaced. And I'm just wondering if the fragility you mentioned with AD and just LeBron, at some point, your body is going to react like a normal human being. Like, how much caveat do you think they actually can put up with to make this work?
I think that the issue I see is that I just don't know what the alternative is, right? Because you're not, I don't think you're trading LeBron, and I don't even know what a LeBron trade like looks like. Like, what are you getting? I mean, he's such a hard player to value because he still is, to me, like in that top 5 conversation. It's just, you don't know. There's like a ticking time bomb element to it of just at some point, he's going to be 38 and he's going to be 39, and like we've just never seen a player be this good this late into their career, and there is at some point, I think, going to be some type of drop off. And then with AD, I think this is the lowest his trade value's ever been. And if I'm trading AD, I want a top 15 guy back. I'm not accepting anything below that. I'm not going for like Dallas trading Porzingis and getting back like, and obviously it's kind of worked for Dallas, but not to compare AD and Porzingis, but like I just don't think you can do the role, get a few role players back and get some picks and be like, you only have 1 to 2 years left probably of the LeBron AD core, maybe 3 tops. And if you're really going all in on the next 1 to 2 seasons, I just have a hard time seeing an AD trade that makes sense. Like even if you get like Damian Lillard, and let's say that's like the optimistic kind of trade package back, Like, is Dame and LeBron enough? Like, I don't think so. I think you need like an AD type, and there just aren't many guys like that.
It's gonna, at the very least, you're running into a problem with your defense at that
Yeah,
point.
so it's like
a Dame LeBron defense.
I don't see an AD trade that makes sense. So I think what the Lakers have to, I mean, they probably have to put the two on some type of load management program, or pick a different term if you don't like load management. They have to preserve them. They have to figure out. And with AD, it's been a couple freak things. With LeBron, he's also had a couple freak accidents that have happened. But I think you got to find.
But it doesn't matter though.
I mean, but also too, like these are things. I mean, I'm going to push back on that a little bit. I think Andy might too. But let's do that next. And then we also want to talk about the other half of the equation that you mentioned, which is you can make this work with the right team around them. So we'll discuss all of that stuff next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net, your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info for all the latest sports development, league reviews, news, including the basketball NBA playoffs right now, which have been just really bonkers, really entertaining, and Major League Baseball in full swing right now. Go to betonline.net. They've got MLB previews up right now for the AL and NL because the season's still young. If you're not quite sure exactly where to put your money, they can help you figure some of this stuff out. They are, like a lot of people, big on the Dodgers, but just the NL West in general, they find very interesting. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. So head to the website today, use your mobile device, learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the games start.
Okay, so I don't say this, Jovan, to pick on you specifically or whatever, but you hear this a lot.
Go for it.
But you are here though,
right? But since you said it, and you're right there, when people talk about like freak accidents or bad luck or whatever it is, like freaky injuries, like you're walking down the street and a piano falls on you. That's a freak accident. That's tough. Like LeBron got undercut by Solomon Hill, and both guys, I think, this year had injuries where they stepped on another person's foot and rolled an ankle and all that stuff. And, you can call that bad luck. You can call it a, kind of a freaky little injury, or as opposed to just wear and tear. But once it happens, and I think this was the point Andy was going to make too, once it happens, that your body doesn't know the difference.
Yeah.
And so like the scars are there for LeBron, and the scars are there for Anthony Davis. I'm still worried more about AD than I do LeBron. I just don't. I can't enter any season confident that either one of these guys is going to give me 65 games. If they do, the Lakers are going to be in great shape. But
I also just don't think that stuff is really all that freak. There's stuff that happens in basketball. It's not like a bear ran on the court and bit one of them. Like
that would be freak.
Like that's a freak accident. Like
sure, yeah, no,
like you didn't fall down the stairs.
That's Vlad slipped on ice.
Yeah,
no, that was Vlad Radmanovich.
Vlad Radmanovich.
That
was a freak and funny accident.
No, I mean, I think you guys are right, and actually, I made that point recently where I don't know if I buy fully that AD's injury prone, but he has had enough injuries now where it is concerning. Again, like your body, to your point, your body does not say, oh, this was a freak accident, so we're going to recover in this way, versus like, you just stepped on, so right. It's a concern. And I think that's where, like, for as misguided as the Westbrook trade was, like, this was the one this was the one way you could kind of talk yourself into it, where you're like, okay, if LeBron or AD is down, Russ has shown he can, take lottery level talent to like 40 wins and kind of be that 30-point triple-double guy and carry teams in the regular season. And then in the playoffs, there's different questions there. But he couldn't do that this season. And one of my favorite the Lakers made a huge mistake, but one of my favorite kind of numbers from the season was that the Lakers were 20-37 in games that LeBron or AD missed at least one game. And Russ played. They were 20-37. And that's just like, that to me is the season right there, where you brought this guy in for, I mean, clearly because LeBron and AD wanted him, and they'd had those preseason conversations, and Russ talked about changing his game and whatnot. But he was supposed to be the guy that if LeBron or AD is down, he could be that second guy, or he can even be the leading guy. And when you play like that game in Charlotte that they ended up losing, but that was like arguably Russ's best game of the season. And you expected performances like that more often. And we rarely saw them. And that to me is just 20 and 37 without LeBron or AD in the lineup. Like that's just, I mean, that's awful. Right. And that to me is, if Russ can say whatever he wants about his own performance or being a scapegoat or whatnot, but like that record had to be better. That had to be at least 500, if not better. And for it to be almost 20 games under 500 is just, I mean, that to me is the Lakers season right there.
Well, Jovan, as you probably have seen, Russ has completely scrubbed his Instagram page now, not just removed the 3 teams. Everything is gone, and that is not going to get you back on it. So we're going to get, I think, deep into the what to do about Russ question for Friday. But you had mentioned in the last segment, like that core still works and has a lot of potential if you can put the right things around them. You've written a lot for The Athletic about who should stay and who should go. What
the Malik
who played
Monk
well,
question in particular,
the Malik Monk, all that stuff. How are the Lakers going to put the right stuff around them? Going into next season. I understand some of that has to do with what you do with Russ, but just kind of broadly, what are they going to be capable even of doing?
Not much.
Good talk,
All right.
That's the segment. No, I mean, I think they got to really target. You have to get a 3-and-D wing, and like you got to get the best 3-and-D wing possible for the taxpayer MLE. I just think that was so glaringly missing on this season.
And you've actually floated, if I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of even would prioritize that over bringing Monk back if you had to pick one.
Yeah, I just think that if you just look at the teams that are advancing to the semifinals, be it Miami, Boston, going to be Milwaukee, likely Phoenix, Golden State, etc. Like all these teams have multiple guys in that 6'6" to 6'8" range that can switch, that can shoot threes at a league average rate at least, and just are versatile cogs that you can kind of use in different ways. And I don't think the Lakers might not have had really anybody in that height range, right? Because like Malik Monk and Malik Monk's shorter, but I was gonna say Stanley Johnson and Austin Reeves are both like 6'5", so like they weren't even
have a guy like that when they won a title. It's the weirdest thing. Like they've avoided wings.
You at least had like solid to good defenders there, where this year's team didn't have that. And then you also like, I mean, we were talking about Trevor Ariza and Kent Bazemore as kind of the 2 guys that they're going to have to rely on. And, those were maybe 2 of the 3 worst Lakers this, 2 of the 4 worst Lakers this season. So I think
I love that you have to keep expanding it out.
There's a lot of guys to choose from.
And also too, it's like maybe they were 2 of the 4 worst Lakers.
Well, like I think
really do a deep dive on this.
I mean, we could go through it, but
you didn't even give Trevor Ariza a report card because he was gone by the end of the year.
Gone, but he would have gotten an F. I got I love that you brought up the report cards because I got flack for my grades when it was like people were saying I was too high on my grades, but my point was like, if you get a bunch of 12th men together and like they perform well for their capabilities, I'm judging each player on what their capabilities are and how they perform. So like to me, Austin Reeves got an A-. Now Austin Reeves at an A- isn't the same as like AD at an A-, right? Like it's different per player. So some of the grades people are like, oh, these are, if they really played this well, the record would have been better. I'm like, no, the problem is they had a bunch of 8th to 12th guys.
I mean, look,
around LeBron and AD, and even if those guys play well,
they're
still 8 to 12 guys.
Peak of his capability.
You're not.
I mean, also too, and people should read your report card over at The Athletic, because if nothing else, the analysis of each player, it's broken down really well. But with all due respect to what you did, I don't really care if the grade for Wenyen Gabriel is an A-, a B+, or an F. Like in some respects, it doesn't matter.
Sort of it doesn't matter. I just found it. I did find it funny that people were. It was just this is way too high. When I'm like, what?
You should be worried that I'm grading Wenyen Gabriel. Like that's
right. What is this, Penn? Are we at Harvard?
But to the Malik thing. I think there's probably a line where you'd rather have Malik than a below average 3-and-D guy.
Mhm.
But if you can get a PJ Tucker, a Robert Covington, an Otto Porter Jr., I think there's a Nicholas Batum. Like, there are these guys that I think would make sense as a starting 3 or a starting front court guy. And I would personally, rather prioritize that, because you're only really going to, you get one thing to use on an upgrade on the roster. And to me, that is the hardest position to find. And you can find centers for cheap. You could find you could probably re-sign DJ Augustine as a fine backup point guard for the vet minimum. You're not finding a 3-and-D wing unless it's in the G League or an undrafted guy for that cheap. So I think that's like your one free agency resource that you can upgrade the roster with. You use that on a 3-and-D wing. And I kind of put some things where, like, ideally can defend multiple positions, can hit 35% on threes. And so like that's something I'm looking for from that position. But aside from that, I would look to try and keep Malik if you can't find one of those guys. And then bring back some of the younger guys, Austin, Stanley, Wenyen. Those guys are on cheap contracts and I think are better than a lot of the alternatives that are probably much older.
Right.
Kinda,
And if
going back
slotted
to last
into a
season.
7th, 8th, 9th, 10th guy, it's not
Exactly.
so bad.
Really quickly, broadly speaking, a guy like, because these are in your mailbags that people should also be reading, and you gave a lot of really good responses to some really good questions about the offseason in the future. Guys like Otto Porter Jr. or a Covington, a PJ Tucker, how financially viable do you think those guys would be? And B, how viable do you think they'll be given a lot of the uncertainty about the team? For with what they're signing,
would they be as good for the Lakers as they are for the teams they currently play on?
Potentially not. And you got different factors there where PJ Tucker has a player option for, I want to say, like 7.2 or 3 million. So he'd actually be taking a discount to come to the Lakers, which probably not. So probably not. I mean,
what's not to like?
I will
on the one hand,
maybe. I will say, like, I think. I mean, they obviously didn't get anybody really at the buyout. Although, like, I guess DJ Augustine kind of.
I mean, he was fine for what he was supposed to do.
Like, I think going back to last offseason, you saw, like, Kent Bazemore took a discount and more had a bigger offer from the Warriors and went to the Lakers. Melo was someone that I think maybe could have gotten a little bit more money. Like, I still think the Lakers, for as dysfunctional as they've been, they're still the Lakers. Like, I still think there's that element of, like, you have LeBron and AD, and as long as you have that kind of core, I think you're still going to be able to get some free agents that want to play in Los Angeles, want to play for the Lakers, and are willing to maybe look past some of these things. I also think if you're a 3-and-D guy, like, I'd be looking at it like I can go ball out, be like a 32-minute a game guy for the Lakers and potentially get a bigger contract. Like that's how I'd be kind of viewing it. Sign a 1-2-year deal with like a player option or something. Or so I think Robert Covington and Nicholas Batum are probably out of their price range. I could see those guys getting above the taxpayer MLE. I would say for either one of them, with Kawhi coming back, you might just have a rotational logjam with the Clippers where they just have so many, they still have Terrence Mann and Amir Coffey and different guys. So, like, I'd almost be looking at it like I might not play I might play 15, 18 minutes a night, where for the Lakers, I could start and have a much bigger role and stay in LA and, just have to move down the hall. So I think that's a factor. Otto Porter, would be getting a similar contract to the one that he signed in Golden State. And I know the Lakers had interest in him before he signed with the Warriors. So I think it really just depends on what the players are looking for. But it's hard to separate it from, like, who do the Lakers sign as the head coach and what type of system is he going to run? What are the supporting pieces? Who's their starting point guard? Like, there's so many factors here to really judge how a guy fits. But I would say that would be my top priority for the Lakers is finding a good defensive forward who can defend multiple positions. Absolutely. And at least hit three. Because the one thing I put in my story today was, like, look at the current roster for next season. LeBron, AD, Russ, Wenyan, Stanley, Austin, and THT and Kendrick Nunn. LeBron and Kendrick Nunn are the only guys who are above average shooters in that core. Everybody else is below average to awful.
Oh my.
And it's like
really thinking about
your foundation going to next season is like a bunch of non-shooters. Like all the shooting you signed is gone. So that's like another kind of thing here is like Lakers really have to find a way to add shooting, but not one-dimensional shooting. And shooting is expensive, so it's tough.
Oh my goodness!
It's tough.
All right,
I don't envy Rob Pelinka.
All right, on well, he did it to himself. On this note, we are going to save more of Jovan Buha for Friday. We're going to talk about, you mentioned Frank Vogel. We're going to talk about how the Lakers are going to go about replacing him. And we will address the elephant in the room of roster reconstruction, meaning Russell Westbrook. All of that for Friday's show. Andy and I will be back next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by rockauto.com. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models out there, it is impossible to stock all the parts you would need in a traditional chain storefront. And why would you spend 30%? 50%, 100% more for the exact same auto parts at a chain store or new car dealership anyway, dummy?
That's stupid. You wouldn't do that.
You mark. I mean, that's if you can't recognize the sucker at the table, it's you, pal. But you don't have to do that at rockauto.com. For example, Honda Odyssey fuel pump, $353 on average at a chain store, only $216 at Rock Auto. They're a family business. They've been serving auto part customers online for 20 years. So whether it's a classic or a daily driver, get everything you need in a few easy clicks delivered directly to your door. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck, right? Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need, rockauto.com.
Okay, so we'll have the second part of our conversation with Jovan for Friday's show. We'll talk about Russell Westbrook and what to do about that. Andy, something needs to be done. And where the Lakers might go with the coaching search. So that's all coming up for Friday.
There's a lot that needs to be put back together with this.
Humpty Dumpty is shattered on the ground. It is.
There's a chalk outline around Humpty Dumpty right now.
But it's funny, like, well, not funny, haha, but it's funny. Like going through this with Jovan, we've had this sort of the beginnings of this conversation, Andy, about how do the Lakers go forward? Because there are major risks with LeBron and AD as your core from an injury standpoint, and all of that. But you also have the issue of low value, and that's what stuck out to me in talking to him about this group going forward. Is he's right. Like the concept of trading LeBron is fascinating, but the idea that you're going to get like a big haul of picks and like a couple good young players, or I don't necessarily think that's a guarantee, because most teams look at, like he said, the sort of the time bomb aspect of it, but also he wants to be on short-term deals so he can go find Bronny if Bronny gets in the league. So that's tricky in itself.
Well, I mean, I guess it depends in a lot of ways on just how close do you think you are to winning a championship. And if, say, you think you are like the Raptors did when they traded for Kawhi Leonard, knowing full well that there was a really good chance, and this is the way it ended up playing out, that he will be here for 1 year, and this is our window to make it happen. But we know as an organization that we have gotten close, and we can't get any further. We need to add something, and we need to take that type of swing. If you're an organization like that, maybe you think, you know what, it is worth dropping in LeBron, maybe for just a year, who knows? But that championship, if we can get it, will pay for itself.
The other half of that, though, is AD. And, the idea, Jovan was talking like, you don't want to trade him for less than a top 15 guy. Presumably a package of, or at the very least, a package of picks that is similar to the one that you gave up. Who satisfies that need? I mean, it's just, these guys are really hard to trade if the goal, or trade LeBron, AD with but not LeBron, or like to try to thread the needle where you're going to both either stay competitive or maximize the capability of rebuilding is also very difficult.
Look, all of these questions are really difficult to answer, and it speaks to the precarious position that the Lakers are in right now. I think what it ultimately comes down to is at some point, you are going to be rebuilding this thing. Like unless you manage to find a way where you can win now and win later, or just keep a perpetual cycle going the way the Spurs did for a long time, the way the Warriors, in ways that I think even surprise them, have managed to kind of bridge the gap between what Steph, Draymond, and Clay have been doing, or still doing right now, but then what it might look like with a Kuminga and a Moody and maybe Wiseman, depending on what he looks like.
It's kind of amazing. I was just thinking about that, like that this rebound that they've been able to get in this injection of young talent hasn't included Wiseman at all.
Right, but it's very difficult to do that. But you presume that at some point you are going to be rebuilding on all this. So I think what it really requires is an honest look at your situation now and saying, how good do we really think we are going to be with LeBron and AD moving forward? Not how great we want to be, not how great we want to project to be. How good do we actually think we're going to be? Because the pain is going to come at some point. So to me, it's about the position you put yourself in when you are eventually encountering the pain. And having assets, however limited, can make that pain relatively easier to deal with moving forward. So it's really just about, as opposed to the Laker ethos of we are always going to be in the championship hunt. The reality is, no, you're not. And nobody always is. And that's a mindset that can actually get you in a lot of trouble and can actually prevent you from building towards a championship, as opposed to feeling like you need to always put yourself in the closest position possible, even if it's really not that close.
It's a matter of being like the right kind of aggressive. Is it aggressive to trade those 2 picks this summer? Yes. Could it backfire? Yes. But can you do it on something that's smarter than trading for Russell Westbrook? Like, not every high risk trade is automatically dumb. That one kind of was, because the problems that it laid out for you if it didn't work were so obvious, and the risks that it wouldn't work were so obvious. But they could make another big swing this offseason that wouldn't necessarily be stupid.
Right, but the problem the Lakers are in right now is some of those big swings that are being talked about is just attaching picks to get yourself off Westbrook.
Right.
And I personally don't think if you are bringing back somewhere between a neutral to negative return, where you really see the biggest positive as getting rid of Russ, I just don't think that's a good.
Oh yeah, no, you can't do it. If that's your choice, you have to. You just have to suck it up and eat it.
Right. That is bad aggression.
Yeah,
in my mind, like that's
it's got to be for real players.
That's a panic move.
It's got to be for real players.
Just don't think it's that. I don't think it is that pressing to get Russ off the roster.
And so that's actually the place that we will pick it up for Friday's episode with Jovan Buha, continuing that conversation. It will start, Andy, with what the Lakers should do with Russell Westbrook, what they can do with Russell Westbrook. We'll get into the coaching situation as well. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go find the show there if you want to watch it, as well as listen to it. And we will see everybody on Friday.